Hi, guys. Thanks for doing this.
So good to see you.
Good to see you.
Any of the three of you have any questions or concerns or anything you want to throw out now?
Yes. My question is when we're going to hang out and actually share a meal.
I love that question. And Bianca, queen of our schedule, I will put all responsibility for that on you.
That's fine. I used to resent that, actually, but then you started making plans without me recently, and they were all wrong. So I will take it back.
Bianca, we're married to the same person. That's why. It's constantly making plans for dinner or for whatever. And says, oh, we're having dinner tomorrow night. Like, who are you having dinner with? We're having dinner with stuff. I'm like, no. I didn't agree to that. And then he said, oh, God, I don't want to, I can't counsel. I feel guilty. I said, well, this is a unilateral decision. It's a unilateral cancellation.
And then I realized it's good for you.
Yeah.
The terminology we use around this house is MP and YP. YP is your problem.
How many things in the house do you think are my problem? In fact, Alexander has started to use the YP, and I don't like it.
To you?
Yes. Yes. But what I want to know from you, Chodo, for inspiration really is, are you countering Koshin's plan making on principle or because the date truly doesn't work?
Just to be cussed most of the time. It's called oppositional defiance disorder. Koshin likes to term it that way. Usually it's because I haven't been consulted. I mean, for me, any kind of surprise, any change, for me personally, it's coming, given, my background, my childhood stuff. It's like, if you're going to change something, let me know or ask me first, because I can't take, it's not the word. It's really triggering for me. If suddenly it's a surprise, oh, we're doing this. Oh, this has changed. This, or so we're going to do so and so. I say, well, I need to know these things up front. You can't just spring something on me.
Even if it's so interesting, because it's even with people that he, as you both know, that someone that he actually likes, which is not, a huge circle. So it's interesting.
Very small.
Let's just say agency and consultation are important to you.
Very important for me. Yeah. I think it's probably more to do with agency. Really, and it's not about being in control. It's about being partnered with.
And maybe a touch of.
Well, around most things it's control, but yes, I think it's about, respect for me. It's like, hey, maybe I don't want to do that.
You use the word partnership, and I remember early on in our relationship, our marriage, Dan used to just automatically forward things to me, but CCing the person who is requesting a date or something, and he would say, Bianca is going to deal with it. And it took me a really long time, and still today, sometimes I have to remind myself that most of the time this is coming from a place of generosity and partnership. But because of the space that I came from, it has felt, and I don't think it does as much anymore, and now proof is in the pudding that he shouldn't be planning things, but it was more like, I don't have time to deal with it. Here you go. Your time is less valuable than mine. So that lack of even choice on an email or a text where somebody else is already there with the expectation felt a little bit like a very, very minor kind of assault where I had no choice in the matter. But I do understand more after many years of marriage that where he came from as a child of an intact family, and he has said, this is me inviting you in and being a team. And that is not a natural instinct for me at all.
I think Koshin's very much the same. He does it from a place of inviting me in and a place of love, and yet it doesn't come across that way to me. But it is coming from that place, and yet for me it's like, it has to do with I think part two. Don't do anything lovingly don't do anything loving for me, because that can reach you. Because what's the payback?
Oh, that's interesting. So that puts Koshin in a really tricky position, because if he wants to do something spontaneous and generous and loving for you, you're going to view it with suspicion.
Yeah. Welcome to our marriage. Welcome. Yes, it is very tricky. So I'm also like so aware of that it's like, trying to figure out what would be nourishing, and knowing that there's some steps and a lot, as we call it actually really affectionately, like the rules. There's a lot of rules and like how to do things. And so sometimes I want to do something spontaneous, and that's when we get into trouble. Sometimes.
What are the rules?
Seek permission. No, it's to ask me if I would like to do this. It's
like super explicit, like, or thinking about seeing this person or doing this thing on this date. How do you feel about that?
Or I've made a reservation for. Really? Why? But I mean, the rules have kept us together for 23 years, so they're not that stringent. It's that strict.
And we can laugh about it too. Like,
right.
when like there's an impasse and like he'll get angry, and then we can be like, oh, the rules. We forgot the rules.
Right.
Whiplash Willie can go.
And we remember Whiplash Willie shows up, and
Wait. Who's Whiplash Willie?
Whiplash Willie is
one of my many characters.
Looks like Chodo.
He sounds like
But
Chodo.
sometimes, like, after he says something, you're like, ow, my neck, just like you're just blindsided by that energy. And so like the beauty is actually, so just like actually just calling it. So I say to him, so Whiplash Willie, glad to see you. And when Chodo's ready, I'd love to talk to him about this, and we can participate later. Because I feel like to actually having a sense of humor in our relationship and has been incredibly important. And because things are tough, and sometimes we get upset and we get uncomfortable. And I think it allows us to be real and loving and stay in relationship when things are tricky.
I have a million follow-ups, but I'm feeling a little protective of Chodo here. So because we're talking about all these rules and how he's Whiplash Willie, and I know you also sometimes call him Negative Nigel, and it's like you're talking to him like you're performing an exorcism, and there are good reasons here. So Chodo, can you just describe a little bit, to the extent that you're comfortable with it, can you describe a little bit of your childhood so people understand the derivation of all this?
So I immediately go back to 4 or 5 years of age, where coming from a very, single mother, 17 years of age when she had me. So she had no role models. She was kind of a wild woman, wild child. So there was always a string of different fellows in her life. And she had a predilection for violent alcoholics, even at 17. So there was I never felt safe. I never felt in control, because she was never in control. Well, she was in control, but in a very kind of unhealthy control way. So there's always this fear of what's going to come next. Where are we going to be living next? Who we're going to be with next? Are we going to have a home to go to next? This little kid was like, a mom would disappear for weeks on end. She would go, she was going out to find a job, and I would be living with my aunt. And she would be, I'll see you tonight. And then she'd come back weeks later. So it was never really knowing. So I have to know what's happening. Where are you going? When are you coming home? Yeah. I mean, that's really where it began. That's the next. So it's like a real deep-seated fear of not being taken care of, included, and feeling safe. Mom coming home with a different person, a different man. Every once in a while, it's like, who are we having dinner with tonight? Who is this person? I don't know. It's like,
and they were dangerous.
And they were, usually dangerous.
I appreciate you talking about that. I want to say It's not out yet. I don't know when it'll be out, but Chodo's been working on a memoir. I've read parts of it. It's absolutely beautiful and harrowing. And so there's a lot more to this story, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. But I'm glad you said it, because it really does put the rules in perspective. And it's amazing you can have a sense of humor about it, but these rules come from a real place.
Yeah, so something as just really simple as a lunch reservation. Oh, for instance, for a Christmas gift, a holiday gift, Koshin bought tickets to go see Modi, this wonderful, wonderful Jewish comedian at the Beacon Theatre. And he gave me the tickets. I'm like, this is great, but no, I don't. You didn't tell me this was going to be happening. And I feel like I've been ambushed. And it's so fleeting. It happens in just a split second. And then I say, oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you. It's just, I really like this guy. I really appreciate it. And I think if Coach were to say, listen, I got us tickets for something that you really like, that you really appreciate, and here they are. But it's when it's kind of given. I don't trust gifts, basically. What are you giving me? I need to know. Or you give it to me. I don't trust it.
But also, sometimes it takes you a minute, or it takes you, like, you have the reaction, and then to me, it's like your practice allows you to, like, almost in a couple breaths, to like come back and be like, oh, right, I love this guy, and we're gonna have so much fun, which we did do. But I think it's sometimes what I experience in the relationship is that sometimes it's learning to have a loving attitude for me, to realize, like, when I was even handing it to him, I was like, oh boy, just having to realize that will come, and then there'll be a wake after the wave. And I will be able to actually enjoy it. But it's a process that to me has been an important part of loving each other.
What I'm hearing here, and Bianca, I think this kind of reminds me of our interview that we did with Bruce Perry, who's this incredible psychotherapist and I think neuroscientist as well. He wrote a book, and he wrote it with Oprah, and the basic thesis was, we're asking the wrong question in relationships, romantic or otherwise. Often we ask, what's the matter with you? And instead we should be asking, what happened to you? And so, like, understanding your partner's shit, understanding their black bag. I know that's a term that you, Koshin, use a lot in your teaching. Everybody, it's from a poet who talks about how we're all carrying around an invisible black bag of our past traumas. And unless you can kind of see the other person's black bag, then the ride's going to be bumpy no matter what. But if you're not dealing with the bag, you're in trouble. Anyway, Bianca, does that all sound right to you, given our past history maritally and editorially?
Yeah, I have so many things sort of going through my mind right now. One of which I should just say, not directly related to what Dan is asking, that I just felt very overcome by emotion, just loving you guys in Chodo, just feeling as much as I've heard your stories over and over, and I look forward to hearing them again and again, it still feels so raw and fresh every time. And, to the extent that I can relate even in the smallest way, I just love you so much and can't believe what you've been through, and so grateful for what you put out there. Both of you, of course. And along those lines, I was wondering, as far as the rules go, because we haven't had that conversation, even though we know a lot about each other. And my past may have more sort of highlights, but I think some of the lowlights from Dan's past are sort of coming out a little more slowly. And it's not like in any given scenario, you're holding those black bags equally for each other, because you're having your own experience. And so I'm just wondering, at what point in your relationship did the rules get established? Was it after, a long period of trial and error, and then being like, oh, okay, wait, this is what we understand about us. Here's how we should go forward. Or were you just sort of that together psychologically and emotionally early on to say, Chodo, like, this is what I'm about. This is what I need if you want to be with me, how you need those things and how you adapt them over time?
I think in the beginning you must have got a sense of the fact that I needed rules, that I needed to feel safe, right? Also to emotional support, and yet it was very difficult to receive. And I think you knew that. You must have known that from the very beginning, because I tend to be an open book. I'd like lay my shit out on the floor and say, here it is. This is who I am. And I think, probably in the beginning of the relationship, it wasn't so slowly. Well, you can answer the question, but for me, I would say it was like a bit by bit by bit, like a little carrot. Yeah. But what was your experience?
From the very beginning, I was very aware and also drawn to you, of course, and so entranced and delighted by your complexity. And also, like, there were parts of you that were, to me, your level of anger was, as you know, was actually terrifying to me. And it would scare the crap out of me. I had a hard time understanding that it didn't have to do with me. He would just get really angry about things. But I think at the same time, like as we were getting to know each other, you wanted to, as you called it, try before we buy. And I said, no. Like you have to make a decision that you actually want to be with me, because I was actually so clear that this was like a real thing. And Chodo was in another situation. So I was like, you have to
say I was married.
He was married. And I was like,
I've been married 6 months.
He was married 6 months. And
so I said, can I try before I buy? Because this might be infatuation or
yeah.
He's like, mm-mm.
And my grandmother too was like, don't do that, because otherwise then you'll always be with someone who did that. And I feel like in so many ways, like that was a really important part of the beginning of forging of our relationship, to say, like, what are we doing and what are we willing to do? And we were both willing to make big sacrifices, which I think we often do unconsciously, but I feel like we both had done a lot of work psychologically on ourselves. And we were both, as pretty steady practitioners. And I think all of those things help an enormous amount, so that when we encountered things like needing rules, it was actually helpful. And we both could understand, because I also come from a background with lots of trauma too, not the same, but just my own version. And so I think that I was also able to appreciate the rattled tenderness that he experiences and the need for protection. So, because I also need it too, and learn. And I think that we're always trying to learn how to support each other in that, which is a road.
I think we should also say that I'm very loving and very generous, very open and heartwarming, caring, which comes from a place of deprivation in so many ways as a child. I'm very, very generous and very loving and very caring, and I show that in my food, in my gifts. So I really think about Koshin, what he brings to me, and how much how can I repay him in ways that are not always physically intimate. I can show my love by giving you this. I can show my love by doing this. But sometimes around physical intimacy, there's still that kind of fear on occasions, right?
That was a kiss for you listeners. And I would add to in terms of your generosity, Chodo, like also creating a beautiful space. You're super into flowers and design, and so it's not just food.
Yeah, so I think that it's also really learning how to respect one another is a rare thing. And learning to really, to me, one of the most important parts of our relationship is our love and shared heart and appreciation for we're so different in so many ways, and yet we share this, I think, a kindness and a love for each other and for others that feels the most important thing, and it feels rare, and it feels devotional and spacious at the same time to me.
Two wounded warriors.
Yeah.
Meeting.
What about you two?
I was just thinking that we should probably have some names for each other, because even though there's a lot of humor, it's usually after the fact. Well, it depends what we're talking about, but for the times when you really need it, it doesn't usually come right away. Although it can't be, the equivalent of saying you're being hormonal, because no woman likes that. Not that you've done that. I'm just saying.
Okay, I was just going to say, I
no,
don't
no, you
do that.
haven't. I'm just saying calling somebody else out on their state can also go very wrong. So you have to read the room. But I don't want to know what your name for me would be, but we should think about it. Because I do think it would, not on air. I have a few in mind for you, but also not on air.
No, you can say those. No, I have nothing. I have no guard.
I need to.
I know. I'm so curious.
I need to choose very carefully for my own self. Yeah, but I think that is very useful. And there was a turning point for sure, as we are also very different backgrounds, different expressions of caring, different changes in our outlooks and choices in life, many of which have paralleled each other, some of which are just like off cycle. Dan has very much figured out his lane in terms of shifting from journalist to whatever we're calling you now, but it's working, No, but you know where your passion lies, both intellectually and professionally and all the things. And I'm sort of in an in-between place. And that certainly affects me, how I am on a daily basis for now. But yeah, to have a little perspective, which we have in learning more about each other, but in the moment when one is not feeling cared for as much as they'd like to be, and the other isn't in a place necessarily to hear it and respond to it, that is a tricky zone. And so a name might help. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, it kind of reminds me of like performing IFS on your romantic partner. IFS, just for the uninitiated, everybody on this call knows what it is, but just for the listener, internal family systems. I'll drop some links in the show notes. I've done some episodes on this. It's a form of therapy where you name your inner parts. We all have different aspects of our personality: jealous mode, anger mode, generous mode, and you name and create relationships with each of these aspects of your personality. And Koshin coming up with these names for Chodo's parts is, and it's probably not a coincidence that Koshin is a trained therapist, is naming aspects of Chodo's inner repertoire. And I think the question you're asking, Bianca, is like, how can you do that, especially with some humor that doesn't make the situation more combustible in tenuous moments?
Yeah, well, you can't make it up on the fly, that's for sure. In the middle of the discussion.
Well, I would imagine what you guys did is come up with these names when you weren't in the middle of a fight. And so that when you were in a fight, the names could be invoked with some degree, some potential for success.
I think our experience too is actually learning Whiplash Willie and Negative Nigel, really actually naming them avoids a lot of fights, actually, because I feel like when those folks show up, they tend to cause trouble, right? And that's just what they do. And so I think that actually us being able to have a sense of humor about it in the moment, right, is able to kind of allay it. That has been amazing. Because for me, because actually one of the things that has been challenging for me in that situation is that I used to take Whiplash Willie and Negative Nigel so personally when he's just feeling angry or just feeling negative or whatever that is. And I used to, because of my history, feel like I did something wrong. So now it actually has been actually very healing in our relationship to not have to believe that.
But shouldn't it work both ways also?
I was supposed to say, let's just jump in there for a moment
I feel very protective.
Koshin Klein and Freddie Freud over here. Melanie Klein. Koshin Klein and Freddie Freud. It's like, you know what? Stop therapizing me.
Right.
He says, so what's going on for you? What's the story you're telling yourself right? Which I love, Brené Brown. What's the story you're telling yourself right? Jared Colonna. We all know Jared Colonna. What's the story you're telling yourself now? I was like, you know what? F you. Freddie Freud. Leave me to it. I'll be just fine. Koshin Klein. So I do have these pet names too.
I've just learned those two just now.
Yeah.
This is a living, live moment.
Freddie Freud over here.
It's a good one.
Isn't that great?
But what you're saying, Chodo, is that that sometimes when he does IFS on you, it doesn't go down well.
It never goes down well.
No, he usually tells me to go F myself.
You could say fuck on this show. I don't know why you're not saying fuck.
So usually let's go fuck yourself. Or other words. But I'm fine. And I usually just say, okay, I will. I'll go do that. And I'm going to go to the gym or whatever that is. So I think that it doesn't always, like, in that moment break it, but it does for me.
What makes it complex too is this kind of relation, this back and forth thing, this psychological back and forth. So I can drive him to this place where he needs to go to the gym, get out of my sight, kind of thing. But then when he leaves, it's like, when are you coming back? So I get really. If he's not back in an hour, it's like he's not coming back.
You get insecure.
I get really insecure, right? And then I'm texting, "Where are you now?" I'm in the gym. How long are you going to be? Da, da, da. Then it's like, how long are you going to be? Because I need to put the kettle on, or I need to start dinner. When really it's like, when are you coming home?
Yeah.
Right.
Will you come?
Are you coming home? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I used to have that experience a lot. Now I ask when he's home with a different answer.
When are you leaving?
How long is it going to be? Take a little more time.
Tomorrow's fine.
But I used to have the same fears. And with Dan traveling so much early on and just being sort of too busy and also unfamiliar with the emotional state of somebody who fears abandonment, which I genuinely don't feel I have that fear anymore, but undoubtedly it comes out in other ways because it's a part of your history that doesn't really go away, even if you have a better relationship with it or to it. So it doesn't present like that at all for me anymore. But yes, it's got to present in other ways. And that probably comes out in not necessarily the content of our arguments, but the manner in which we argue, because then it touches on a place of real deep-seated, like existential, am I not good enough? And all the things that I know might be pointed out to me because they're probably true. It's easier to get defensive because that is the very thing that you worry about, being the thing that drives somebody away.
You and I again joined at the hip, Bianca.
Always.
Koshin's much better at, it's like, I know this is not about me. When I kind of shoot the arrows towards, it's like, this is not about me. And I fully get it, love you, and what's going on. And sometimes I can say, what got touched right now is boom. Another time I just have the whiplash really comes out. But so this beautiful relationship towards each other and our own kind of hurt places. It's much easier for Koshin to say, well, what's going on right now.
Well, there are moments where I do take it really personally. Still, there are moments that I get I feel like a little baby, or like a giant baby, actually.
Right.
And I feel like I want to be a pup in his papoose, I feel like, and I want reassurance. And that makes him crazy.
Well, that's where we have, Chodo and I have sort of always had a bit of an alliance and this special love. Not that I don't love you dearly, Koshin, but we've always also talked about in relationship, occasionally there's a little bit of a flip where Dan and Chodo are a little more aligned. So it's interesting that there are ways in which we are more similar, Chodo, as individuals and friends and in community than in relationship. Even if some of the same fears can be triggered, sometimes your response maybe to your own fears is more similar to Dan's frostiness.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to be disparaging, but your way a little bit is to push away, even if you want to pull closer.
I plus one on everything you just said there. I don't take it personally at all, at least not right now.
The day is young.
Yes, and you sleep well, yeah.
The name that's coming to mind right now is another person we all know, and I think we all really revere, is this guy, Michael Vincent Miller, who is a legendary therapist and in particular has done a lot of great couples therapy. And Bianca and I have done a lot of couples therapy with Michael and really love him. And he has this concept of intimate terrorism. And he came up with this concept before 9/11 and before the word terrorism really kind of took on it's always been a hefty word and he chose it deliberately, but it's a little bit, it's even more loaded now. And so he's always quick to point that out. But he talks about how in every relationship, or pretty much every relationship, there's usually somebody who fears abandonment and another person who fears engulfment. With us, Bianca, and I think I can kind of see it with Koshin and Chodo. In your case, given your past, there were fears of abandonment. In my case, fears of like engulfment, meaning specifically for me, like I can't handle this. In fact, where I would go with it is I must be a monster who's incapable of love because I cannot handle these demands.
What demands do you speak of?
I apologize. They're not even like big demands, just basic demands for not being frosty in moments when you need it. You don't make outsized demands, and I apologize. I should have been clear about that. So this is in no way to denigrate you, more to talk about my own feelings of deficiency and how this fits within this concept that Michael talks about of intimate terrorism, that each side is triggering the other person's fears and can put you into a downward spiral, which my friend Evelyn Tribole calls the toilet vortex. And the way out, I think, or at least one way out that Koshin is able to do sometimes, and I think we're all able to do sometimes, is to have some compassion, not only for yourself, but for where the other person's coming from, and to recognize that it's not personal. And so over time for me to recognize, like, to have more confidence that, yeah, I'm not a horrible person. Like, yes, I might get annoyed and inappropriately, but I still have what it takes to like be a husband. Anyway, so does that, Bianca, I know I might have pissed you off there. Did I clean it up?
You did clean it up. And I'm not, which is not to say there aren't other things that are appropriately, triggering, but just as a generalization. And I would say one of the triggers actually is really putting those labels on each. I understand the concept, but the word abandonment is a very challenging one. I think it has there's a victim kind of quality to it. There's something about it that doesn't, for me at least, feel quite right, but it's easy to have an opinion about it, from the inside or the outside. And so part of that struggle, knowing that, if we're in a position where you're thinking about it, I know that you're not understanding actually. You may think you're understanding our roles, but the understanding of what I'm actually feeling in fearing abandonment, for lack of a better word, gets a little diluted. And of course, I can't make that whole argument in the moment. But what I would say is that there's a little bit of both in everyone. You're not all
Yes.
one thing. I definitely fear engulfment, and it doesn't present in the same way. So yeah, I would just be careful for me personally about that. But that's why I rejected it at the beginning of our sessions with him, only because it's largely correct as it would go.
But not always so, right?
Yeah.
That's true with every model, right? Every heuristic for the mind or for relationships. It's like, maybe not every model, but for most models, they're useful to a point.
One of the things that I think is implicit and explicit in our relationship together, the four of us, is that we all appreciate doing work and to be exploring, and to both individually and as couples and as friends. And I think that one of the things, I was thinking about one of my mentors, this guy named James Hillman, said, if you don't exaggerate, what's the point of speaking? So actually, when I was thinking about,
And you exaggerate a lot.
he was my mentor, But but I was wondering about, Bianca, your response to Dan, because I was just hearing him, and when he was sharing what he was sharing about, I was imagining that he was not talking about large demands. And I was just curious, since we had this live moment, if this would be okay. And it may not be okay, but I'm just curious because I feel that that is something that happens with us, that sometimes we say words that fire us up in some way. And I was thinking about when Chodo thinks I'm being Freddie Floyd, for example, I'm actually using concepts about him rather than feeling it. Right? I think that that's when I'm kind of actually, in a way, pathologizing him, or he feels pathologized. So I wondered if it would be okay if you want to say anything about it.
Sure. I mean, I think what you said right there was really illuminating, feeling pathologized, even if there's truth to it. You know, it's sort of the semi-joke I was making before about being told you're hormonal, which again, Dan has never done, but just the historic, you know, women, are you on your period right now because you're being hysterical? Whatever that thing is, again, that being a joke for the most part. Yes, in those moments when you're already feeling vulnerable, even if it seems like you're on the attack, the only thing that's going to make it worse, even if it's based in understanding and compassion, is assigning it that role in a way that takes away your agency, that makes you feel, you allow yourself to feel misunderstood, or worse, it touches so much on the thing that's true that it's too painful. And your only choice is to sort of push it back out. One of Dan's greatest strengths is he's exacting with his words and, you know, is brilliant and can make, you know, logical arguments that nobody could argue with, except that that's not always the plane that we're on, which is not to say he's not having emotions. It just means that I know, for me personally, given my emotions and lack of skillful communication using logic in those moments, I know I've lost from the beginning, because there is no better human that I know out there that can think and speak so clearly and so exacting in the way that Dan does. And in those moments, I can't understand it. I'm just paralyzed because I know I can't do better. There isn't even really space for me to understand his motivation, or more importantly, his hurt. So as somebody who used to very much be a people pleaser, who's reversed course on that, probably to the other extreme, just in trying to, you know, heal on my own, it's kind of had an effect on Dan that I've missed on a number of occasions, which is that, you know, I hurt him too.
Meditation is not just a quick fix. It is a practice to change all parts of your life, and you don't have to be perfect. You just have to show up. Happier Meditation app meets you where you are so you can realize more than you thought possible with a flexible approach that grows with you and wisdom from some of the world's most insightful teachers. Happier helps you get more out of meditation so you can give more to every part of your life. Go to happierapp.com and start meditating in a way that truly fits you. You made a lot of really excellent points in there. I agreed with all of them. That's going to sound a little self-serving because you said all this nice stuff about what a good arguer I am.
What made you look good?
That's not the part I'm trying to accentuate. The minor point I want to take your side on specifically is this use of words on my part. And like, yeah, you had a minute there where you got a little activated by my use of the word demands. I take your side on that. Like, I understand how that would sound pathologizing and like maybe some percentage true, but not all the way true. And same with the word abandonment. And so I think I can make the empathic leap on that.
I'm just blown away by Bianca's thoughts and process.
But I genuinely don't know why.
You don't know? Oh, because you spoke so eloquently. I mean, you spoke
Thank you.
from me, my heart too. It's like, yeah. Koshin is, and it's not to sound denigrating, which it is.
Get ready for the sweetness.
No. For me, no, by denigrating myself, so.
Okay.
No, I can do that too, but I'm not speaking about me. I don't see myself equal on so many levels intellectually. Most of the people that we know, I come from this place of a very feeling place, as opposed to education, should we say. I mean, I have a lot of wisdom, but it comes from a very different place. So sometimes I get very tongue-tied when when coaching gets into this kind of therapizing or just being actually very smart. It comes across as very smart and very learned. And I'm like, as a kid that ran away from home at 16 and had no real formal education, I think, I don't know how to respond. So I respond with violence, verbal violence, abuse. And picking up on what Bianca was saying, so I come from this very feeling place, this place of, it's not emotional, it's very feeling. It's a deep-seated feeling of, it all comes out, all my shit.
And all your wisdom.
And all my wisdom. And all my wisdom comes out of that place too. But I think it has very little to do with intellect and more to do with just being in the world in a very different way. Sensory, it has to do with sensory, it has to do with it's a deep empathy for others. And not so much for myself, but for others, which makes me such a great caregiver and great companion to those who are dying, because it's just so fresh in me. It's like, yeah, I can go there. I'm not afraid of this moment. I'm not afraid of these moments.
You're not afraid of fear.
I'm not afraid of fear. I'm not afraid of your anger because you are dying. So and this is not coming from any books. This is not coming from any teachings, but other than my own innate wisdom and
30 years of meditation.
Yeah, 30 years of meditation for sure. 30 years sitting on a cushion, but this deep knowing that what I have to offer is enough, right? I don't really need to have all those credentials. Although there are times when I wish I had them, but mostly it's like, no, fuck it, this is what you get.
In terms of what you're saying about, what you do at the bedside, with people who are dying, and it's just incredible. So I'm not likening what I'm about to say to what you do, but in the context of my training and the ICU and quite a lot of death as well, it is the place where I feel most comfortable, most wise, most capable, actually, at the bedside, just at that fine line between life and death. Not just, mostly, yes, the patient, but the people around the patient. But if I'm honest about it, of course, a lot of it, most of it comes, I think, from empathy and awe of the human body and the world and just solidarity in whatever way you want to look at it. But also, I'm my best when the spotlight is not on me.
Mm.
Given that our issues aren't truly gone, but we don't have to face them in those moments because there's nothing more important, I think, than what others are going through in that context. How much of it is also sort of self-serving? I often ask myself. Not to take away from the motivation and the skill set and the sort of purity of what's happening, but I do know that I'm more capable in that scenario because it's not about me.
Over the years, my Buddhist practice has taught me, or I've embodied or embraced the idea that it's not about me. When I'm in the room with someone or I'm at the bedside with someone, there's no othering. It's not they're in that bed. I'm here. It's about how do I join this person, but not as coming with any agenda and not making it about me at all. It's like, it's the two of us in this room, in this moment together. Yes, you're the person that's dying, and I'm here with you. There's that cliche. There's no separation. In fact, there isn't, because we're actually both dying in the moment. It's just that you're further along in the process. So if I can take out the me, the self, the Chodo, and just be fully present to whatever is happening in that universe, in that room, beyond the walls, just being here with you. It's so fucking profound. There's no room for ego, I don't think. If for me, my own experience. There's no room for ego. There's no room for, I'm here, I'm your savior, I'm going to be with you till you die, till your last breath. Don't worry. It's like, no, just here we are. This breath is all there is in this room right now. Just, that's it.
That is really what you taught us in the foundations course. And I guess the thing when I try to look down on that scene, sort of outside of myself, I see one thing. And I agree, there is no room for you. And you are together. But there is a sense of relief for me that I'm not in myself.
Mm-hmm.
However the semantics work. There's a relief that the spotlight isn't there and the best of me can come out. But the counter to that is that you return to your life on the days that you're not at the bedside. And in some ways, the absolute opposite happens.
Mm-hmm.
And is that destabilizing for you as somebody who has so much practice in being present and the breath, and I'm not nearly as close?
So first of all, I just want to say also the gift of not having that formal education for me is that I am coming totally from this place of feeling, totally from this place of intuition and instinct. So I'm not getting, as with a doctor, there's all sorts of other stuff going on in the back of the mind. You know, what's his patient, how long, whatever it is. You know, it's like there's all sorts of other internal information coming. For me, it's just, and yet, when I'm out of the room, of course, you know, it's like I'm in my life in a different way. You know, yes, I'm in my life when I'm with someone, but outside of that experience, yeah, I'm on the street. I'm coming to work. I'm getting caught up in all my bullshit and my ego, for sure.
And not.
Well, I don't know about the and not. I know for sure. I'm getting caught up in all sorts of bullshit in my mind. You know, it's like, because ego, it's in that place of being with someone who's dying, that all that, as I said, that stuff drops away. And in my life outside of my work there, it's like it all comes flooding back. It's just the beauty of, yeah, go ahead.
I want to just interject because I feel like actually maybe this is for, you know, Dan and Bianca and you, like, and myself, like, I think that all of us have had that experience of dropping some of our bullshit, and so that we can actually be with another person, and how wonderful that is. It is, to me, like, that's what compassion is. And for me, what I keep learning, and I feel like I've seen with all of us in different ways, not like any of us are good at it, but the willingness to do that in more and more moments throughout our life, to me, in our interpersonal relationships, and like in your marriage and our marriage, and in our friendships, in our family relationships, and all these things. Not like we're ever good at it, but we kind of know, we've had that experience. I mean, I know I've had those moments with my father, who I love very much, but we had this like terrible dynamic about this one particular thing. And I was able to it was through the experience of being with people in extremis that I was able to really see how I was getting caught up in some bullshit in my mind. And I was able to let this one thing drop. And it was an amazing experience. And I've seen that with you, Chodo, like that. You should see his relationships with people in Starbucks. Like, he's so alive and present to so many people, like between where we live and this place. It's just like that. It doesn't mean that, like, and also we all get caught up. But I think it's always hard for us to also celebrate that there are moments where we don't. And I've experienced that with you, Dan. I've experienced that with you, Bianca. And of course with Chodo, just like that, where you're just with each other. I just want to celebrate that. There's those sweet moments that I feel like I'm just appreciating more and more.
I think what you're pointing to, Koshin, is that it can be really helpful to have some sort of practice, whether it's going to therapy or meditation or whatever that you bring into a relationship, because it does allow you, and I'm going to quote Michael Vincent Miller again in something he said to me, which is to turn down the I, the letter I, the ego, the ensconcement in yourself, to turn that down and be more available. Doing therapy, doing meditation can help so that you can show up in the right way for whoever you're, married to or in a relationship with.
I wondered, Dan, you've spoken about this before, I'm sure on a number of occasions, but your experience with Ronnie, when you were in hospice, how that was for you when it comes to like being with another person who is approaching death, although it took a long time with Ronnie, but how were you in that relationship when you were just you and Ronnie?
How did it change your relationship?
How did that change
Bianca?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. So just to give some context to the listener, Bianca and I did a 9-month course through the New York Zen Center for Contemplative Care, which is run by Koshin and Chodo. They have a 9-month course called Foundations, and it teaches you essentially how to be a volunteer in a hospice. And so I was volunteering during those 9 months in a hospice where I met this guy, Ronnie, who had been admitted to a hospice with a diagnosis of 3 days to live. And by the time I met him, had been in the hospice for 3 years and ended up living 3 more years. And the reason, in part, why often people stop being a volunteer at the end of the 9 months. I kept being a volunteer is because I developed such a close relationship with this guy, Ronnie. We had nothing in common on the surface. He was a construction worker from Harlem who, lived a completely different life than I did. But we really hit it off. So this was in like 2016 when I met him and when I did this course with you guys. And I did experience moments of, the self falling away and being totally available to him and others in the hospice. And to get back to Bianca's original question, I could step out of hospice and like have a temper tantrum on text with somebody at work, and all of my crap would come back. And so it was a really helpful experience, but it wasn't like I all of a sudden was fixed as a husband and father.
No.
You were too quick to agree with that. I just want to point out.
There'd be a lot of hospice.
All of us are like, man.
There'd be a lot of hospice with divorce course.
Just in our remaining time here, the executive producer of the show, DJ Kashmir, has often pointed out that one of the hallmarks of the show is that we're relentlessly practical. So I do want to come back to some practical stuff that we started with, really, and I just want to put a fine point on it for the listeners. And so I'm kind of going to throw some questions at you guys, specifically Chodo and Koshin, for listeners who want to learn from how you've had this incredibly successful relationship for so long, especially given the fact that you both come out of backgrounds of significant trauma. And in the case of Koshin, he's been on the show before. I'll drop some links in the show notes where he talks about his childhood, which was no walk in the park. Specifically looking at what we can talk about that we can leave people with that's practical is understanding your partner's patterns and having some compassion for them, understanding your own patterns that you bring into relationship, and being able to call out the other person's inner characters skillfully. It's not always going to work. And also being able to create some sort of rules, or to bring in another name that we're all familiar with, Jerry Colonna, who talks about relationships in a work context mostly. He talks about giving people your operating manual. And that's, I think, portable over to romantic relationships too. So I'm throwing a lot at you now, and I'm kind of looking at you, Koshin, to land this plane for me. But to help me think about what specific advice we can give to people, given everything we've talked about in this conversation.
So the first thing to me is the beauty of being in relationship, for example, with Chodo. And I feel like actually, again, what the four of us share is that to be engaged in our work, which is to understand and be interested in our psychological and spiritual life inside and out. And to me, so finding therapy, finding a meditation practice, both individually and finding ways to connect together around shared exploration is really, really, to me, is the reason why our relationship works. is that shared interest in the value. So when it's one thing to have values of growing and learning and not having our values match. And so I feel like that we do this very imperfectly, but the willingness to say, like, how are we doing our values and what we're actually doing together matching? So that's one thing. And to me, you do that through psychological work, spiritual work, meditation practice, finding ways of digging in the long term, finding ways to really, the second thing is really define those loving ways to know each other, to really, to know those, especially the characters of ourselves, the aspects that are challenging, and how do we recognize them as patterns, and it's not who the person is. So IFS talks about it as parts. Jung calls them aspects. That I think it's just to really appreciate and learn how to love, actually, and have actual real compassion, which is not easy, for ourselves in relationship with our partner's challenging aspects, and to realize that they're being challenged and working with it too, and it's not fun for them in those moments either.
Right.
And that for me is really challenging and really important. Learning to have real compassion for your partner when they're suffering and they're spitting at you, not literally, but like that it's just like coming at you, and realizing and learning how to set boundaries or rules to say, that's not okay. I know you're having a hard time, and I'm going to go and do this, and I look forward to reconnecting with you. I feel like that is really important. And then another thing is what Jerry Colonna taught us in our relationship was, telling the story about yourself. Like, what's the story you're telling yourself right now? That has been so important in moments for Chodo and I. It's like another part of the toolkit of really realizing, like, wow. It's also a way of recognizing that you and your partner are struggling in that moment. And to me, it's actually another way of developing love and compassion, is to look at him across the room and see his face struggling, and I'm struggling. And I realize, like, we're both caught in a story. And learning how to say that has been so freeing and healing for me, and I think for us.
I'm right now caught in this moment of deep admiration for Koshin's ability to just put it out there, so clearly, with such intellect, use that word, with such a learned person that he is. I sometimes sit next and think, wow, how does he put all that together so systematically, so quickly? And it's not coming from a place of envy or jealousy, or anything. It's coming from this place of deep, deep love. Wow, look how different we are. But how it has worked for 23 years. I come from this very deep feeling place. Koshin comes from this very deep place of intellect, and also feeling. But Koshin has this depth of feelings too. Not as deep as mine, you understand, but unbelievable. But I think for us, it's about playing it, being able to play in the sandpit together, and also know when that sandpit turns to shit, and being able to stay in that too. It's like, yeah,
to be uncomfortable together.
Yeah,
I feel like, that's another huge.
It's a big one.
Huge. Willing to be uncomfortable together and awkward together is, to me, another mark of love. Like, wow, this is so uncomfortable. We don't know where it's going. And we're both feeling awkward and uncomfortable. And how do we care for one another?
And every single morning before you leave the house, I love you.
I never leave the house. This is another important thing. I learned actually in the emergency department. I never leave the house without holding his face and telling him how much I love him. Because I'm very aware from working in the emergency department how many people, loved ones or friends, would come in and be like, I can't believe the last conversation we had. Or like they were leaving the house this morning. I was like, fuck off. Or like whatever that is. They just weren't caring for each other. So I always appreciating that it might be our last time. So I always want to leave the house while letting him know exactly how I feel. So I feel like actually that's a pretty awesome relationship thing. So if you want a relationship hack, to me is like, have you told the person that you love exactly how you love them today?
Do you do the same, Chodo?
Not as willingly, should we say, or as easily as Koshin can do it. I mean, again, I didn't grow up with that language. So, I wasn't raised with that language of I love you and I'm going to miss you and hurry home or anything like that. So it is it's a task sometimes. Do I say it enough? Not enough, but I do say it.
You could use a little work.
I could use a little
You're
work.
perfect and complete, lacking nothing, and you could use a little work. As generous as Yuki says, we all can, but the reality is me too.
Well, I really relate to Chodo on this one because I know it's going to surprise you, Bianca. This is my term I'll use about myself is like I bump up against a wall of like stinginess. I don't want to fucking do it, right? Especially if I feel like I'm supposed to. There was a New Yorker cartoon where the wife says to the husband, or it might have been in reverse, the husband saying it to the wife. One of the people in the panel says, "I love you," and the other person says, "Stop threatening me."
I love that. That's it for me.
Yeah. I'll throw this out there, Bianca. I don't know if you're comfortable keeping it in, but after our most recent disagreement, one of the little hacks that we've been experimenting with, and this is a little unfair in its structure, I will admit, but in the morning, Bianca will give me a hug. And it kind of puts it all on her, I know, but it works for me, but I don't know. We haven't actually talked about it much, Bianca, so I'll ask you in real time and see how this goes.
I mean, it sounds pretty bleak that after 18 years, that's the move, which is not to say I'm not minimizing the experience for you, but without sort of the background to understand where you come from and what isn't comfortable for you and where I come from, it is a lot to kind of put out there. I don't know that you fully see that I accept you mostly for all the ways in which you are not comfortable doing those things. And of course, if I'm feeling hurt, wouldn't it be nice? But even in those moments, I think you have a story that I want that. So if I say I love you in a tough moment, you really, really don't trust it. You think I'm only doing it for the reassurance, when even if there was a time when that was true, that robs me of my expression and it robs you of experiencing it. So I think when you ask, how is it for me with the hugging in the morning, it's great because I like to hug and I know it's difficult for you. It's quite simple, actually. My barrier is being sure that it's okay. Because what I do is I have my own sort of survival mechanism that is way outdated, which goes to this operating manual that I want to bring up again in a minute, is to read the room, read faces, and make sure I am okay. The morning is easier than a lot of other times in the day because I haven't actually done anything yet that could possibly piss him off. Unless it's hung over the night before and that's why he didn't sleep. So yes, that sometimes crosses my mind. But, that is a much safer thing for me. But what I've learned is that these things were not actually safe for Dan for reasons that didn't have to do with me early in our relationship. One thing that I think I've brought up on the show before is, he used to travel like crazy as a journalist. And early in our relationship, he would leave every other day. And sometimes it would be for far, far away for a while. Sometimes it wouldn't. Sometimes I wouldn't know. And what I wanted to, in the same way that I think, Koshin, you're expressing your emergency room lesson, that feels like a little bit of a microcosm of how I see my life, which is like, could this be the last time? So I wanted to just say something special, feel something special. And I didn't know how to express it. And Dan got frustrated with it. And he said, look, just look at this as a revolving door. Obviously, to the wounded one, that's very scary because that's a mode of exit and a mode of return at your own whim. But if I want to look at it from his side, I'm always coming back. Right? Why make the overture? What's the big deal? I'm coming back. And knowing Dan so well now in terms of, to the extent that he remembers anything about his childhood, but one thing is clear, he gets homesick very easily. And even though I didn't let myself consider that I could be home for him for a long time, looking back on it, I do see that. So I got a long, wordy way of saying like, it's good for me to be able to feel comfortable to the extent that I will let myself feel comfortable leaning in, as long as you don't have a scowl on your face.
Sometimes we are married to the same person, Bjork.
I just want to put something in, which you could probably not even, you don't need to leave this in, Dan, but, the only time my mother hugged me was 2 weeks before she died. And she said, it was like, I'm sober 37 years. So 27 years ago, over the Christmas vacation, I went home to Birmingham. And just as I was leaving, she went to hug me and said, I love you. And I froze. I was like, please don't do that. And she looked at me with such pain in her eyes. And I said, I can't. I mean, that was the only time in 50 years, or it was 45 years, that she'd ever reached out to hug me. Because she had no model. She had no idea how to be a parent. And so now when Koshin, more often than not, Koshin will go to hug me and I'll freeze. And then I have to okay, it's okay, it's safe. And I know that's painful for Koshin because he just wants to hug me and say, you're okay, I'm here. It's very tough.
Well, we do enjoy a good snug. We do enjoy a good snug.
And when that's not available, we have cats.
We have Wojcik and Bodhi.
You wanted to come back to operating manual, Bianca?
I think that's a really important hack. And this is built into what you were saying, but you have to know what your operating manual is. And I think that takes work, the work you're talking about, and that takes very individual work. Your partner is not there to sort of receive your trauma and help you figure it out.
Right.
It took a long time for me to understand in a way that your partner can't be everything for you. It shouldn't be everything for you. And you have to figure out this shit on your own, but also not to sort of indulge it so much that you aren't open to change and growth. And one of the things that I was really attracted to early on that continues, even if it's really not easy, is that because of our differences in our affect a lot of the times, it does force me to pause and look at what I'm feeling and what I'm expecting. Or, he'll have expectations of me that, maybe in my dreams, my better self would actually be like that. So what could feel like an unfair request, if I stop and think about it, I kind of want to be like that. So it does push me to leave some of my shit behind. So the operating manual has to be informed but flexible. And I think that's really important because there's so much you can get out of your partner in terms of feeding back on your own happiness, I guess, as an individual.
Yeah, Michael Vincent Miller talks a lot about how romantic relationships are like the crucible for growth. And he's got this really incisive critique of the modern, romantic industrial complex that sells this idea that, as he says, we're going to go from one enchanted evening to happily ever after, and it's, we talk about falling in love as if it's simply a matter of gravity. Nobody's talking about the work that is involved here. And that work that Miller emphasizes, I think so skillfully, is, and I really like this reframing, is there's a lot for you in this work. If you're looking to get happier, get stronger, get healthier, there's an opportunity right there in your relationship.
Yeah, both have to be willing, because we know plenty of relationships where, one partner is willing or one of them isn't, or and it's so easy to fall into complacency also, right? And so I think the shared willingness and the shared value, I just feel like we can't underscore that enough, like how critical that is, like to not only just say like, oh yeah, I'm into growing, but this is how I'd like to grow now, right? And how I want to continue to grow and open up. So I just feel like that is so important and vital. The shared vitality individually and as a couple is a beautiful and challenging and adventurous thing.
I'm just thinking of our age difference, almost 20 years apart almost, and the work that comes more easily, I think, to Koshin than it does to me, being 20 years older and maybe more set in my ways and less open to new ways of looking at things. And that's not to say that it's healthy or correct or in any way, but it's just it's also one of those things where I could be really curmudgeonly. Like, it comes with age. You get to be a certain age, you're going to be a curmudgeon.
And you can use age as an excuse.
Yeah.
Because you also can age and keep growing. So
yeah, I'm not saying I can.
I'm just saying.
I'm not saying I can. And I'm not saying I'm not. I'm just saying it takes a little more time to acquiesce.
Good for you.
Good for me. It's good for you too. It's like it's good for you too.
It's good for us, for sure.
Sometimes it's so funny because I reverse the role. Sometimes I'm the best father, it's like his daddy, and other times I'm like the best. He's like the best daddy. It's like daddy's such a gay thing. Best father. I don't mean
homosexual.
We are homosexuals.
Wait a minute. You guys are gay?
You didn't know?
First time Alexander called me daddy, it was like, oh, that felt like closer to my real name than Dan. Like, oh yeah, that's who I am.
Wow. What's that? The first time I called you daddy.
Might have been a little less wholesome, but yeah, beautiful nonetheless.
It was wholesome. Don't be rude. Yeah.
This has been amazing. It feels complete to me, but I do want to just check with the three of you that whether there's something you wanted to talk about that we haven't had a chance to hit.
I feel like there could always be a part 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And there will be.
It just feels like an ongoing conversation.
Yes. One final question here is, and I'll direct it to you, Koshin, but you can take it if you want, Chodo, is just can you remind everybody about all the amazing things that the New York Zen Center for Contemplative Care does in the world in case they want to learn more about you guys? And also maybe throw in there the books that you've written.
New York Zen Center for Contemplative Care, we do 3 main things. One of them is we have Zen practice for anyone who's interested in Zen practice. We have sitting every day and Zen retreats and half-day retreats once a month, as well as 2 times a year, we have a 90-day practice period, so to deepen our practice. So everyone is welcome. The second thing, we have our education program. So we have a certificate in Soto Zen Buddhist studies, as well as a master's program, and along with the program that we've talked about, which is Foundations in Contemplative Care, which is really about bringing your values and what you're doing together through studying together and serving at the bedside. And the last kind of large education program we have is called the Contemplative Medicine Fellowship, and we're delighted to be with some of our shared friends and faculty here, which is for any physicians, nurse practitioners, or physician assistants who want to spend a year of really learning what it means to be in fellowship together, to really redefine and reclaim what medicine is, and to use contemplation to actually be part of the medicine to how we engage and lead and work with our resilience. And then we also do care programs. So through our students offering care at the bedside, as well as Chodo leads bereavement support, both in groups and individually. And we also companion people through the advent of a serious diagnosis through their dying process and caring for their loved ones afterwards in bereavement. So it's a beautiful opportunity, and our website is called zencare.org. And And I I've edited a book that many people find very helpful called Awake at the Bedside, Contemplative Teachings on Palliative and End-of-Life Care, which Mr. Campbell has a beautiful essay in also. And there are two other books. One is called Wholehearted, Slow Down, Help Out, Wake Up, which is about living an ethical life, and Untangled, Walking the Eightfold Path of Clarity, Courage, and Compassion, which is really about how do we untangle our suffering through relationship, like what we've been talking about here. And it's through Shakyamuni Buddha's, historical Buddha's teaching of the four nobilities of suffering, the causes of suffering, how we can change, and the path itself. So they're good resources. And the main thing is to live our lives fully and care for one another.
I just want to say that everybody should check out the New York Zen Center. The incredible resources there. And I also highly recommend all of Koshin's books. And I really recommend Chodo's book, even though it's not out yet.
Two working titles, Dan.
You do? What are lay them on me? I know one of them. You will never amount to anything in this life.
You will achieve nothing in this life.
Yeah.
And the next one is You Die More Than Once.
I like them both. I would vote for the first one, but I mean, I buy either of those books.
You Die More Than Once, Zen and the Art of Survival, something like that.
I like that.
Well, the other one was Disco, Drugs, Drama, and Dharma.
That'll sell.
Thank you all for doing this. Love you guys. Thank you.
Oh, Bianca, love you, love you, love you. Happy both.
Thank you, guys. Love you.